Hi, and welcome to my channel, Creative Photo Folk. Today, I'm going to be demonstrating a slightly more advanced Photoshop masking technique than I've shown you before on this channel to create a portrait illusion using a simple chain link fence. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this is not my favorite technique, and I actually refused to teach it for a long time. I think because it was one of the first creative techniques I ever saw, and after seeing it for years and years, I just felt like it had become overdone, and I thought there were way cooler ways to use masking in Photoshop than this. But the great thing about photography techniques is they do go through trends, they become trendy, and then you don't see them for a while, and this is one I kind of haven't seen for a while. And so being a person who wants to teach you every creative photography technique there is, I can't really be a snob about it and gatekeep the ones I don't like. And actually giving this one a go, I did like it. That always tends to happen. So it's about having fun with your camera and with Photoshop, trying new things, being creative, even if it is an idea that's a bit overdone, you're still learning new techniques in the process. And so that's how I feel about this now. So although this is an editing technique, it actually has to be shot in a very particular way in camera. To shoot this, you are going to need your camera on a tripod. You're going to shoot your fence. You are not going to move that tripod or your camera or change any settings. So you want to lock in whatever exposure you're using by using manual mode. And you'll want to lock in your focus by using back button or manual focus. And then, after you've taken your fence shot and not changed a single thing, you're going to get your model in and photograph them. Now, one thing to be really aware of, let me just show you the model image. I say model, I mean me, looking very average. And so I liked having my hands here to, give a little bit more of a story. But by putting my hands on it so rigidly, it actually pulled the fence down a little bit. And you do not want that. So if your subject will be touching the fence, just make sure they do it really, really lightly, because if you move the position of that fence, it's going to make it much more difficult to mask later on, as you'll see as we work through this. So what you want to do in Lightroom or whatever photo program you're using is highlight your two images, your plain background and your subject, and we're going to go to Photo, Edit In, Open as Layers in Photoshop. Now, in case your tripod has moved a little bit, it's always good to take an extra step. So what we're going to do is highlight both layers. I'm just going to make sure one is highlighted and control click the other so they're both highlighted. And then I'll go to Edit, Auto Align Layers. We're just going to use Auto. And so what that will do is if there was any movement between your two images, it's just going to try and line things up. And it has found just a little bit of a discrepancy there. So you'll see there's now a bit of a seam. So we'll just crop that out using the crop tool with the shortcut C. Now I've currently got my ratio set to square. So up here, I'm just going to change it back to original ratio. And then I'm going to pull in these edges, and I'm holding down Control when I do this because Control means you can move a little bit incrementally smaller than usual. So this makes quite large changes, but if you hold down Control, you can move just a tiny bit less. I'll do that around all three edges. I think that left one was fine. And then hit my tick. That looks good. We're going to crop it later on anyway, so that's fine. So with that done, I'm just going to drag the subject layer to the top. And so you'll see that that fence has moved a little bit here on the right. So that's a bit of a problem, but we'll try and do what we can do. And I will crop this a fair bit later. So what we now need to do is start creating masks by adding a layer mask to the subject layer and then painting away bits of the image to see the blank layer below. Now, this is kind of going to be advanced masking. I have tried every single Photoshop selection tool that I thought might work in this situation to easily select this fence, and none of them do. The best technique for this would be if Photoshop could choose something that's in focus, because the fence is in focus and the background isn't. So if we were working with this one, you'd think that would be a fairly easy selection. And Photoshop does have something called Select Focus Area, but I've never in all my life got it to work. I'll even show you. And I think that's because Photoshop just doesn't really understand what focus is. Hopefully with AI, perhaps it will. So you can see it's just missing so many bits, and I've tried painting over them and it just doesn't work. It's way too time consuming. So we're going to cancel out of that and do it the hard way. So first we need to decide which bits we want to erase, because we're not obviously going to do all of them. So the first one I did was this little square here. I thought her hair's really flyaway. I'm just going to get rid of some of that. So making sure our layer mask is selected, and we're going to zoom in because that will help us see what we're doing. As I said, I've tried different selection tools. So, you might think, well, the quick selection tool might do. So let's give that a go. No, terrible job. So what we're going to do is use our old favorite, the pen tool. So the pen tool is the most advanced but most accurate tool that there is. And you access it by clicking on this calligraphy nib, which is the pen tool, and the shortcut is P. And we're just going to manually select it. So I'm going to zoom in even more. And then what I'm going to do is make a point at a corner. And then I'm going to make lots of little points along the way. And I'm only going to show you this once, so you don't have to sit through doing it every other little triangle I cut out. But as painful as this looks to do, it's actually really therapeutic. I don't know why making little dots along a line is so therapeutic. I love to do my pen tool masking in front of the TV. So if you do make any mistakes, like you put a point where it didn't belong, you can just press Ctrl or Command Z to undo and go again. And then once you join them up at the end, they'll change color. And then we'll right click inside and go make selection. We'll leave that at 0, anti-alias, new selection, hit OK. And now we've got our little selection. So what I can do is, making sure my layer mask is highlighted, I will load my brush tool with B, this one here, making sure that black is loaded in the swatch here. If it's not, you can press X to toggle between them. And then I'm just going to paint away that square. Press Ctrl or Command D to deselect. But you can see, let's have a look at that. See, you can see a little bit of that fence behind because it has moved. So to fix this problem of the fence having moved, and hopefully you won't have this, so if that's the case, just skip over this part. But what I'm going to do is teach you a little technique for removing fences, so that will get rid of our problem. So a little tip for free there in case you ever need to remove a fence from an image, like at a zoo. So what I'm going to do is make sure the background layer is on the top, and then I'm going to press Ctrl or Command J to make a copy of it. And now I'm going to load my remove tool, and I'll do that by using the little band-aid tool here. And when you hold it down, you'll get some options here, and I'll just make sure that remove tool is highlighted. Then I'll make my brush about the size of the fence, and I can do that with my square bracket keys on my keyboard. And little by little, I'm now going to start to draw over the fence, and hopefully Photoshop will remove it. Now I'll speed this up so you don't have to watch it, but just a little tip, I find it's kind of best if you just work along a line like this. Now you might think it might be smart to go around the other side of the fence and just photograph the background there, but that's going to change your perspective and it's not going to match up in the background. So I'm actually really happy with how this is looking. So now we'll have no problem using the pen tool to create those sections and then easily deleting them without seeing that fence problem behind. Now we'll bring our girl back on top. But there was one particular area that did cause a lot of trouble in terms of where the fence has moved. So look how different that is. Let's work on that so I can now show you that it's no longer an issue. So let's make that selection. So looking real good over here where we had the issue before. This little section needs a little bit of tidying, and to do that I'm just going to go to my brush tool with B. I will make sure the hardness, so the hardness is up here. And you can play around with your brush settings in here. So it's actually pretty high already. I'll keep it at about 70–80%. And then I'm going to make it quite small and just get in and tidy. Whoops, making sure that black is loaded. Get in and tidy that up a little bit. So the issue we had earlier is no longer a problem, which is just marvelous. Now, when deciding which areas to cut out, it's best to kind of avoid features. So for example, if I cut out this hand, or even worse, if I just cut out this bit and left the fingers, you just have some random fingers sticking around. If I cut out the eyes and the nose, it kind of really takes away from what makes a person identifiable. So I would aim for sort of like edges like this, like they're cutting in a little bit, but they're not really shielding any major features. If this hand wasn't sort of attached by the hair, then it would just be floating, so I wouldn't have done it in that case. I kind of tried to create a little bit of a vignette by cutting into most of the edges. And then I just did this random one in the middle where I had a bit of blank space to work with. But if you're not sure, before you go through that cutting out process, just like really roughly paint in just to see what it looked like. So if I painted that away and then just undo it. So if it did work, you can then go around and do your selection. If it didn't, just move on to the next square. So they look okay. So I might do those 3 squares, for example. Let's just run through my final image so I can show you what I've done. Pop her in with the masking. There's a little bit of just distraction in the corners, so I just used generative fill, or I could have used the clone stamp tool to clone them in. This one here, I just did a little bit of retouching to the face to get rid of any kind of seams. Then I've just brightened her forehead because I thought that little spot was just a bit too dark. Use levels to really add some contrast. So you'll see I brought in both edges. I really wanted this image to be quite contrasty, and I think that helps it. I've used curves just to darken down the edges, just to draw attention to her face. Selective color just gave it a little bit of a warmer tone, which I like. Hue saturation, I think I just took out a little bit of saturation on that. Yep, just a touch. Darken down any distractions. So there was a distraction here and here, so you'll see that they have been darkened right down. Then I added a curves to darken down even more the areas that weren't her face, and then I used another curves to lighten her face. So that's where the attention goes. So there's still some issues on this one that I'll need to clean up because I hadn't done that remove tool step first. This can be the easiest technique in the world when you do it properly. Just save yourself this work and make sure that you use the same settings, you don't move your camera, and that if your model's touching the fence that they're not actually moving it at all, because that's going to cause you the issues. This is a fun little effect you can use next time you're shooting an outdoor portrait or with your kids for something cool to show their friends. There's creative opportunity everywhere once you know how to look. If this is a skill that you'd love to learn more, come check out my course, Photo Fanatics, or my inexpensive monthly creative photography classes. Otherwise, I'll catch you again next week. Happy creating!